Hey there, Nation. Welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Cheap Shots, our series that is dedicated to showing you guys how to save money on our wargaming hobby. In this case, we're going to show you guys how to quickly as well as cheaply paint up an Ork Deffkilla Wartrike for Warhammer 40,000. And assuming that you buy everything for the very first time using our cheapskate method, you're talking about a grand total investment of $35.21. When you compare that to what the Games Workshop as well as Army Painter supplies, we're talking about a grand total savings of $172.49 on that one as well. So kudos to saving money. And if you notice, this vehicle is the Deffkilla Wartrike. It looks a little bit different though because I do have a couple of crew members on there. As you can see, I got the little red gobo in the back as well as another orc right next to him with a war claw. And the reason why is because I'm not using this vehicle for Warhammer 40,000 per se. I'm using it for an upcoming vehicle-based Necromunda narrative campaign that I'll be running on my channel called Anarchy Road. And in that one, the gangs will use vehicles in order to fight in the Ash Wastes. And my friend Brother Grim wants to play a Ash Waste nomad gang, and he's using orcs in order to do that. So that's the reason why we have the additional crew members. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to paint these guys up really quickly as well as cheaply, and at the same time saving you a bunch of money in the process. Alright, so the very first step we gotta do, of course, is to use some primer. In this case, I use Rust-Oleum white as well as flat black primer. They both cost you $3.99 at your local Walmart. What I decided to do is to spray paint the crew members in flat white primer while I sprayed the actual Wartrike itself in black. So that way I have really good base coats to work off of. If you also notice too, I also did some sub-assemblies as well. I kept the crew members of the vehicle separate, and I just temporarily glued them onto some 32mm round bases, so that way I have something to hold on to when I'm painting the miniature. What I did is I just glued one foot on each of those miniatures onto the base, that way it's easy to peel off, and I'll just do some touch-up painting before I mount them back on the vehicle again. So that's the first thing you do, just do a quick priming real quick for both the vehicle as well as the crew, and you're ready to move on to your first set of base coating. Alright, so the very first thing you do, of course, is base coat the flesh on these miniatures. As you can see, I used 3 different colors for the different crew members on the Deffkilla Wartrike, just to add some color variety to the miniatures. For the passenger who's got the grab hook, as well as the grab hook character on foot, I decided to use Holly Branch by Apple Barrel Paint. For the Great Red Gobbo, I decided to use Crisp Apple by Apple Barrel, and then for the driver, I decided to use Palm Leaf Green by Apple Barrel Paint as well. All 3 of these colors are available at your local Walmart, and they also cost you 50 cents per tube, which is really, really great. And all I did, of course, is just do 2 thin coats of color for each of the parts that I get done in flesh, and I'm ready to move on to my next step. So the next step, of course, is to do a quick dry brush real quick, and that's exactly what I decided to do. So I used 3 different colors to do the dry brushing. I used Lime Sherbet by Apple Barrel Paint, I used Foliage Green by Folk Art, as well as Celery by Nita's Acrylic. I used the celery color for the darker skinned orcs. I used the foliage for my the driver, and I used the Lime Sherbet for the green gobbo. And once again, just do a quick dry brush with those and just apply it really quickly to the miniature as well for all the flesh. The Apple Barrel Paint will cost you 50 cents at your local Walmart. The Folk Art will run you 75 cents at your local Hobby Lobby, and the Nita's Acrylic will run you 65 cents at your local Hobby Lobby as well. So once you get done with the dry brushing, you're starting to move on to the leather goods. Alright, so for the miniatures, a lot of these guys have a lot of leather goods on them, so things like their boots, belts, vests, that sort of thing. So any part that you want to actually done in black, all you need to do, of course, is just add 2 thin layers of of Apple Barrels, just straight black. It runs 50 cents at your local Walmart. Put 2 thin coats on that, and you're ready to move on. So now that you have all the black leather goods painted on your miniatures, the next thing you do, of course, is a dry brush. In this case, I just did a really quick dry brush with Apple Barrel's Granite Gray. Runs you 50 cents at your local Walmart. Just did a quick once over from the entirety of the parts that are done in black, and you're ready to move on to your next step. From there, I need to work on the trousers next. So in this case, I decided to use 2 colors. I used Moccasin Brown by Nita's Acrylic Paint, as well as Gray by Nita's Acrylic as well. Both of those can be found at your local Hobby Lobby. They cost 65 cents a piece. As you can see, for the passenger, the grab hook, as well as his on-foot dismounted option, I decided to paint the trousers on that in a dark gray using the Nita's Gray paint. Did 2 thin layers of that. As for the driver of the Wartrike, I decided to pick out his pants in Moccasin Brown. It's a nice, rich brown color. Did 2 thin coats of that as well, and I'm ready to move on. So the next step, of course, is a base coat as well as dry brushing for the most part. So for the trousers for the orcs, for the guy you did in Moccasin Brown, I dry brushed it with Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel Paint. Runs you 50 cents at your local Hobby Lobby for that part. And for the parts that are done in gray trousers, I dry brushed that with Granite Gray as well, which runs you 50 cents at your local Walmart too. Now, if you'll notice for the little Gobbo character that I have, the Great Red Gobbo, he has like this fur lining inside the jacket that he wears. So because of that, I decided to pick all those out in granite gray as well. It's a nice light gray color that's almost a white color, so it's a nice little contrast to it. I did it for all the fur options, so like the cuffs of his coat, the interior of his coat, the brim of his hat, the little ball hanging out the end of his ball cap. I did exactly with that as well. Put 2 thin layers of both those colors on there. So now we're ready for work on the brown leather portions. These are things like the straps, belts, and stuff like that the characters are wearing. What I did is I just picked those details out in 2 thin layers of territorial beige. I did this for both the straps that are going across the arm of the orc with the grab claw, as well as the belts crisscrossing his chest, as well as the scabbard on his back that holds his little boomstick back there as well. I did exactly the same thing for the driver as well for his pants and some of his leather goods, and same thing with the Red Gobbo. The back of behind him, he's got a little satchel full of frag grenades. I decided to paint that little sack full of beige as well. And then once that's done, of course, we move on to the detail work and start highlighting the accent colors. So things like the cording, the wrappings on the wrist, the masks on the driver. I picked those out in 2 thin layers of Anita's True Red, runs at 65 cents at your local Hobby Lobby. And I put 2 thin coats of that on the red clothing for the Red Gobbo. So things like his overcoat as well as his hat. Did 2 thin coats of that, and ready to move on. And finally, for the back of the miniature, as you can see here as well, I decided to, they have these little flaming skull icons on the back of the driver, as well as the passenger. I decided to pick those details out in 2 thin layers of King's Gold. King's Gold is a nice dark mustard yellow color, and it goes really well with black. So I put 2 thin layers of that. Oh, sorry, not 2 thin layers, 3 thin layers, because it is a black surface. So you might have to put 3 layers of this stuff on, but that's okay though, because this stuff only costs 50 cents at your local Walmart anyway. So we're done with those drivers, and now moving on to the finer details for our miniature as well. We're focusing primarily on the Red Gobbo in this part. As you can see in this photo, I decided to use the holly green for the grenades that's inside that little bag behind him there, and I decided to dry brush those with foliage green in order to bring out the details for the hex marks on all the grenades. At the same time, I also picked out his little bag that holds the grenades in 2 thin layers of territorial beige. And also in the pocket of the Red Gobbo as well is a stick of dynamite, and I picked that detail out within 2 thin layers of ripe tomato apple barrel paint that runs at 50 cents at your local Walmart. So now that we're done with all the detail work and painting of the miniature, the next thing we need to do now is work on the metallic colors. For the metallics in this one, I use 3 colors primarily. I use True Gold by Folk Art, I use Copper by Folk Art, and I also use Gunmetal Gray by Folk Art as well. All 3 of those metals, metallic colors, will cost you 75 cents at your local Walmart. And once again, all the parts will be Gunmetal Gray. I picked out that in Gunmetal Gray. For all the parts will be golden, picked that out in pure gold. And for all the accent pieces that are going to be in copper color, I picked it out in the copper color as well. And once you're done with the metallics for the vehicle, for the passengers, the next thing you need to work on now is on the vehicle itself. So with that, we move on directly to the vehicle. The first thing I do, of course, is I do an all-over dry brush of the Wartrike with 2 thin layers of gunmetal gray. What that's going to do is going to add a nice based, worn metal look for the entire structure of the vehicle at that point. So you could add more coats of gunmetal gray if you wanted to make it even brighter. I mean, you could bring it to whatever degree of brightness you want, but 2 thin layers is enough for me in order to get that grimy, kind of dirty look to it as well. And then after that, of course, I just use Copper by Folk Art. I use Antique Bronze by Anita's Acrylic, as well as Gold from Folk Art as well, and I just picked out the details that I wanted to be in gold, copper, as well as bronze. And so I just picked all those details out just throughout the vehicle as well. For example, the little flame icons at the back of the skulls and the front of the wheels there, as well as the little squig skulls in the back. I picked those out in Folk Art Copper. For some of the armor plating, I picked that out in bronze by Anita's Acrylic, which runs to 65 cents, and I also picked that out in gold as well. So I just went about the entire vehicle and just picked out those metallic elements really quick. So with the metallic colors over with, we then work on the finer details of the vehicle. So for things like the seat, for example, I picked that in 2 thin layers of territorial beige to make that leather seat. And then for example, the headlights on the vehicle, I picked those details out using Kiwi by Apple Barrel Paint. It's a really bright green, almost a neon yellow color. Runs at 50 cents at your local Walmart. Just picked out the little details there. And it was the same thing with the cording around the grips of the handlebars. I picked those out in Delta Ceram Coat Tahitian Blue, because it's a nice turquoise color that kind of goes well with it. And once you're done with those fine details, the next thing you do, of course, is an oil wash. So because we're doing a quick paint method for this entire process, we're using an oil wash in order to do all the washing for the miniatures all at once. In this case, I suggest you use Midwax Poly Shades Mission Oak color. All you gotta do is just give it the once over with like a wash. What ends up happening is that the oil wash seeps down into the recess of the miniature, bringing all those details out. It also blends your highlighting with your dry brushing as well as your base coating, so that way it doesn't have a chalky finish, has a much smoother transition and smooth finish as well. And at the same time, it also mutes down the brightness of the colors that you used. As you can see, the bright colors that we used earlier color is still present, but it's been significantly muted down because the dark staining of the polyurethane mixture has pretty much brought that down. Now, like I said, this is also a combination of stain as well as polyurethane, so you will need to let this stuff dry for 24 hours. Once it dries for 24 hours, and they'll give you a nice hard coat sealing the entire miniature from the elements, which makes it really nice as well. So the next step, of course, is to work on the base that the miniature sits on, as well as the matte varnish. Now, when you do the quick paint method, it's going to leave like a shiny finish on your miniature as well, like a candy coating look. I don't care for that look on my miniature so much, so because I use matte varnish spray by Krylon, I get it at my local Walmart. It costs me $5 in order to do that. You can use whatever varnish you want, or leave it, shiny if you want to. In that case, if you like that whole sheen that's on your miniature, but I don't like it, so I just use the matte varnish in order to do that. So just do a quick once over and you're ready to work on the base. And for the base, what I decided to use was, for the surface of it, I used 2 thin coats of burnt sienna by Folk Art. Runs you 75 cents at your local Hobby Lobby. Just do 2 thin coats on the bases and you're ready to move on to dry brushing and rimming the base. So the final step of the base work, of course, is to dry brush the entire base. I just use Terracotta by Folk Art. Runs at 75 cents at your local Walmart. Gives it kind of like this nice cursed earth kind of look to it, reddish, darkish earth color. And then, of course, I just run the base with 2 thin layers of terracotta paint as well. And once you're done with that last process, assemble your miniature and you're completely done. And here's the end result, what your miniature will look like after you get done using the Cheapskate method like we showed you earlier. So now that we showed you exactly how to paint this up quickly and cheaply, let's go and talk about the materials you need to purchase from Army Painter as well as Citadel in order to do exactly the same method but using their products instead. So first of all, for your primers, you need to buy a can of Corax white spray as well as Chaos black spray. They both run you $17 at your local Games Workshop in order for you to prime your miniatures. From there, you'll need to work on the flesh colors. You'll need to buy Militarum green, Vulcan green, as well as Caliban green to do the base coating. And then you'll need to dry brush those colors with Hellion green, Sabarite green, as well as Scarsnake green, as well as Ogren camo. And all those, of course, run you $4.55 a piece. From there, moving on to the leather goods and details, you need to pick out a Bannon black to paint all the black leather, and then you need to dry brush those with Ulthuan gray. After that, whatever orange details you want to pick out, you need to buy Troll Slayer orange, and for all the parts that are going to be done in moccasin color, the dark brown color, you need to use XV88 as well, and those all run you $4.55. Now, if you wanted to dry brush all the gray, all the black that you've done, you need to use Slaanesh gray, and you use Baylor brown to dry brush all the brown portions that you've done, and those cost you $4.55 for those. Now, for the teeth, as well as for the reddish colors you use, for the red colors you need to use Mephiston red. For the teeth, you need to use more gas bone. Those run you $4.55 a piece. For all the cording that you did for the detail, you need to buy Temple Guard blue. For the yellow details that you did for the miniature, you need to buy Averland sunset. For the parts you need to torch with bright magenta, you need to use Screamer pink as well, and those all run you $4.55 for those products. Now, for the metallic colors, for all the copper, bronze, silver, as well as gold, you need to buy Brass Scorpion, Lead Belcher, Retributed Armor, as well as Screaming Bell, and those metallics will run you $7.80 a piece. Now, because we're using a quick paint method, you'll need to buy a can of Army Painter Strong Tone, which will do $32, and then, of course, after you let that stuff dry, you'll need to matte varnish the miniature if you decide to go with this option, and you need to buy a can of Munitorium varnish, runs in $19.50 for that. And then for the bases, for the surface of the base, you need to paint that 2 thin layers of Doombold Browns, which costs you $4.55 from there. You'll then need to dry brush it as well as rim the base in Squig Orange, which runs you $4.55. Now, assuming you had to purchase everything from Citadel and Army Painter for the very first time, you're talking about a grand total investment of $207 as well as 70 cents. Now, when you compare that to the Cheapskate method, which only costs you $34.71, you're talking about a grand total savings of $172.49 left in the bank, which you could use to buy more miniatures, or better yet, not spend it all and just save it because, saving is good. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you go about quickly and cheaply painting up an Ork Deffkilla Wartrike for Warhammer 40,000. If, as always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to our channel. That's good to do for this episode, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.